Hello, and welcome to this month's edition of InDesign Newsletter, where you learn tips and tricks, things you knew, things you might not have known, things you might have forgotten about, or general things about InDesign. Who am I? I am Andrea Baslatson. I'm an Adobe community expert. I'm also an instructor, a college instructor of graphic and web design, and I also manage a website. So, now that you know who I am, let's get started. What I want to show you in this episode is how to use the objects panel inside of InDesign. So there are certain things you can do inside of InDesign and do not have to leave the app to go into Illustrator or Photoshop to do it. It's right here inside of InDesign, and this effects panel is just one of the things that you can do. All right, so before I show you where it is, let me go into my layers panel and let me go ahead and turn on this snowman that I created. Now the snowman was created right inside of InDesign. Everything that was created from the shapes, every shape that is created was inside of InDesign, which will probably be a future video where we'll create a character in InDesign. Now the thing is, typically you would do this inside of Illustrator, but if I'm already in the program, I don't have to leave it. So why not just go ahead and create it in here? So you can do these type of things inside of InDesign. All it is are shapes. Every single one of these are shapes. These are circles. These are rectangles. This is a circle, and I pulled out the nose. This is the line tool, curved it. So everything that was created here, you can do inside of InDesign because it is amazing. All right. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on our snowman that's in our background a little bit because we're going to focus on him because that's what we're going to create something from. We're going to create effects around the snowman, and particularly these two areas. So his body, okay? So what we're going to do is select those two areas. I'm going to go up to the object menu. We're going to go down to effects, and then we'll just choose anyone. So I'll choose drop shadow. Okay. And as you can see, a drop shadow is added. Now yours will default to black because you probably weren't messing with it like I was. So, but this is what your drop shadow will look like. So inside of here, all you do is just like I did, you check one or select one, make sure this area is blue, and you're going to see these options over here. So with our drop shadow, we have options of overlay, we have blend mode. So this is normal. So this is what it looks like. And you can see that that drop shadow is on the inside of it's every single shape because this hasn't been a combined shape, which is fine. We can fix that later. So there's the drop shadow, but I can make changes to this. And typically, I think the default opacity is 75% like that. So this is what that drop shadow will look like by default with a few changes in here. But we can change that blend mode. As you saw, I changed it back to normal. We can change it to, I think it comes in multiply. And this is multiply, but I can change it to overlay. I can make whatever changes I want to the blend mode, which is kind of cool as long as it shows up against that background. The opacity is 75%. I can lighten that or darken that. I can play with the distance. I can also play with the angle. Right now it's 120 degrees, but if I wanted the drop shadow to be on the other side, I could do that and play with that as well. I'm going to go back to 120 because I think that was fine. I'm gonna hit OK, and I'll go ahead and type in 120. So if you know degrees that you want as well, you can, and I did not mean to hit enter, but that's okay. I'll just go right back into it, go back to object, effect, click on drop shadow, and there it is. Okay, I can play with the distance that I wanted, like where do I want this positioned? Now, when you change this, you're really just changing this X and Y axis. So watch, they change together. So if I move this, notice the X and Y axis are moving. They're moving as one when I change this, but I can individually affect them with the X and Y axis by going over here and changing things at once. So I could change that Y axis here. Oh, so I have a global lighting set, and I'll show you that in a second, and that's what the warning's coming up. But anyway, so I can play with the distance, I can play with the angle, maybe I'll make it 120 again. And I keep hitting enter, so I'm gonna hit object, and I'm gonna go to effect, and I'll go to drop shadow. Okay, so I can make it 120. I can play with the X and Y axis separately if I want. I'm gonna say I'm gonna bring Y down. There we go. There we go. All right, so I can play with this. I can also change the color. So I can go over here and I can say, oh, I don't want it to be black. I kind of want it to be red or something like that. Why you would do that, I don't know, but you can. That's all that matters. All right. So you can do it. You can change it. I can play with the size of it. So you have those options. You can play with the spread, and spread's going to spread that shadow out, as much as you want. So you have those options to play with. You can even add some noise in here. You know what I'm saying? Just to break it up from it looking so perfect and so smooth. I added some noise, and there is my drop shadow. So in here, I can also play with the inner shadow. I can turn that drop shadow off if I want, turn it back on. I can play with the inner shadow, which is happening on this side, and maybe for that one, maybe I want that one to be something like green, um, or something like that. I don't know, but I could play with it, and that's all that matters. Now, notice when I did that, right, I made it green and it changed my shadow, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted to change the inner shadow. Well, let me show you why that happened. Let me go back to making this red like I had it, hit OK. It's happening because I also have to make sure that this is blue. So this inner shadow, I did check it, but I'm not getting the options for inner shadow. It's still on my drop shadow. So this is why it's important to make sure that's blue. Now it's blue. So now when I make changes, it'll affect that side. So let's say I wanted that to be green. There we go. Look at that. Now it's green. And I can say, okay, I don't want the distance to be as far away, just a little bit. I can play with the angle. I can play with the X and Y offset. I can play with the size of it. I can make it larger. I can choke it back some. I can give it some noise. I have all of those options that I can play with, which is really cool, right? So I can do an outer glow. I can do an inner glow. You just have these options in here that are awesome. Now, here's what we're going to play with, bevel and emboss. And anyone who's old time Photoshop probably like, oh my gosh, why would she play with that, right? So bevel and emboss back in the day, 90s, I tell you, this drop shadow was kicking, and 2000s, I think it was a thing. You saw bevel and emboss on everything, and it just became this thing that was just overdone and overused. So but I can play with this bevel and emboss. Right now, you can see a nice little pillow embossing happening here. I can do pillow emboss, emboss, outer emboss. I can do outer bevel, which is going to affect the bevel on the outside. I can do, and then I can change like which technique is used. This is chisel hard. I can choose chisel soft. So I have these really, really cool options. I can do a pillow embossing. Look how nice that looks. I can do, sorry, pillow embossing. Look how nice that looks. I can do regular embossing. So you have lots of options in here to play with the size, the depth of the emboss. You can either make it larger, you can make it smaller, you can, I'm gonna go back to inner bevel. But you have these options in here. You can play with the angle, the altitude, shadowing. You just have options, and I love having options. You can feather, play with basic feather to feather the edges of this. So instead of it looking like this, you have it, little feather on the edges. You can change the options of that. So you can do a gradient feather. Check that out. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that, right? So you kind of have him like ghosting in, and you can also change um how much black is oops, in that gradient. So you have these options here, and I just wanted to show you it because I love it. I love having the options right here. If I was happy with it, there's my snowman, and I would just go in and do the same to his hat to make sure um, that that's following suit. But can you see some like really, really cool things that you can do? Like let's say he was a ghost, and I wanted, half the ghost to be, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like the creativity, your mind, your creativity or your creative playground is right here that you can play in. Or just look how he's blending in the water as well. So much fun things you can do. That object panel is there for you, and it is awesome. So go play, will you? That is my challenge to you. And that is what I wanted to go over with you today. Wow, now that was some interesting information. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got something from it that you'll want to take back and share with others. If you did, please, and you liked it, please hit that like button. If you want to hear more content or know when more content is coming, please hit the subscribe and also hit the bell so that you'll get the notifications. And also comment. Please comment. Please tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see more of. If you didn't see something and you really want to learn something in particular, please put that in the comments. And soon in the future, there'll be a video about it.